Hello, everyone. Checking in with fans, the world, allies, proponents, supporters. I am One Sir Grove. This is C4CW, casting 495 celebrities worldwide. We have just started a new decade, 2020. Gotta stick with that theme because it is what it is. So, the beginning of a new decade is huge. We humans made it to the year 2020, which is just, man, outstanding. And it's really surreal. So here we are in the 21st century, at the start of a new decade, in the year 2020. I mean, come on, man. You have to admit, a lot of you, I mean, it's definitely like right out of a futuristic sci-fi movie, and it's become reality. I'm hearing now, reading now from scientists. By the way, if you're true fans, if you are true fans of this show, then we 495 most certainly appreciate you. Yes, so as a fellow scientist, I am hearing from other scientists that futuristic technologies of the past, in other words, what we as humans would look upon as being future technologies, when we would see, for example, sci-fi movies in the 1980s or even 70s, 60s, moving forward into the 80s and 90s, 2000s, scientists are now saying that we have surpassed those technologies. What used to be thought of as so far off, so far out there, just so far-fetched, far-flung, and outlandish, we already surpassed that. And we made it a reality a long time ago. That is one of the topics, one of the discussions in the science that is scientific community. Scientists are really saying to themselves, to ourselves, wow, we did it. We made on this planet past, air quote, sci-fi, science fact. And if you want an example, I'll give you an example, because I know someone out there's like, Grove, I hear what you're saying, but I need proof. Okay, not a problem. I mean, some people, they just, for whatever reason, hasn't occurred to them. So we're not talking down to anyone. Not everyone thinks alike, right? So one of the examples that's used in documentaries and presentations, as I have described, is the smartphone. The smartphone itself is a prime example. It's a key example because it's so ubiquitous. It's so ubiquitous. It's used globally. You can see where there are Tibetan monks who they have laptop computers and they communicate with other temples and folks around the world. You can see back even in the 2000s, I believe it was, early 2000s is what I mean. There was a commercial on TV, and I can't remember the network or who it was. It was a big like cellular provider, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, some of you will probably remember the commercial, but it showed the native indigenous folks of Alaska, and they were out in the middle of the Arctic and communicating on laptops with other folks like somewhere else on planet Earth. So, and then you hear about Bill Gates, Microsoft that is, giving as a way and means of philanthropy laptop computers to children in sub-Saharan Africa. I read that article years ago. It was like 10 years ago or so. And you can see where Microsoft literally donated, I can't remember, like thousands of laptops. They're just like, here's a free laptop computer courtesy of Microsoft and the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. So kids and I think they were green. For some reason, I want to say they were like green laptops. You know, like the earthly, like color, Mother Nature, Gaia, or something like that. But yeah, so kids in sub-Saharan Africa have long been connected to the internet. And one of the things that I predicted that has come true, that I would like to point out, not to brag or to boast, but just to point out that I called it, and it came to fruition. One of the things that you see on the continent of Africa right now is there are Chinese businesses, government of China, Japan, and Korea. They are investing and have been investing heavily on the continent and in the continent, into the continent of Africa. It's not just China, Korea, and Japan. I say China, Korea, and Japan because those three Asian nations have invested hundreds of billions of dollars collectively. And then you have all these other countries around the world that have invested in the continent of Africa. Well, the continent of Africa is where you find the cradle of life. So that's where humans originated on this planet based on empirical evidence and data that we have. And so it's a very important place on planet Earth. And so you have all these different countries, world, global, collective effort, investing money into the continent of Africa to build it up, scale it up, modernize, and industrialize on an unprecedented level. During that process, there are technologies that are emerging on the continent of Africa that are more advanced than technologies that are in the United States in the mainstream flow of society. Now, I heard about this on, I believe, BBC for the first time. I listened to a lot of BBC, the British broadcasting company, just for clarity there, in case someone wants to know. Yes, I'm talking about BBC. I heard that a couple years back. And what one of these analysts was saying was that these bikes, like a stationary bike, like you sit down on a bike for exercise and it doesn't go anywhere, like the Peloton, bikes or whatever the company is, people do the spin class. It's a stationary bike. There was a concern in Africa that kerosene being used inside homes to light the interior of homes in different parts of Africa. The government, regulatory agencies, regulatory bodies, different groups, organizations, and concerned persons were saying that kerosene should no longer be used, or not used as much, and that folks should transition over to using solar-powered energy and to power their devices and to light the interior of their homes. And so these European companies, they created these stationary bikes where you sit and you ride the bike stationary. Again, it doesn't go anywhere, just for the record. And you get exercise, and at the same time, after like a half an hour to 45 minutes to an hour, sometimes even 15 to 20 minutes of riding on these bikes, don't quote me on the times, but it's the basic concept that you get exercise, and then afterward, you have enough energy to power your TV, your flat screen, your laptop, the lights in your home. If you have a smart home or a home that can connect to the solar power unit, then you can light up your room, and you can have your devices powered up by merely exercising. You exercise, you generate solar power, and then you have the product, consequently, which is solar powered energy. That's fucking amazing. So have you seen that in America? Now, I'm sure it exists somewhere because this is years ago. That technology, when developed by that company, the companies and like devices that is, and those are similar devices, those types of technologies will become the mainstay. Those types of technologies will become, hold on, I'm being directed traffic-wise. Oh, we have some new people out learning how to direct traffic. Thank you. I know how to go my way without you. But I appreciate you for being a member of the law enforcement community and helping to direct traffic even when it fucking doesn't need to be directed. Salute! Nah, but I mean, shit, at least it's law and order, right? Young trainees, cadets. I'm just saying, no disrespect. Job's a job. But yeah, so continent of Africa, man, advanced technologies are being developed and deployed on the continent of Africa. I have been hearing that the Chinese government is very aggressive and has been building, for example, hydroelectric dams. I know I podcasted about this before, but I just want to emphasize the continent of Africa is being built up, devved up, as in other words, developed up. And it's becoming Wakanda right out of the movie Black Panther. I'm not even joking. Like, some people are like, come on, Grove, that's totally like a Marvel Comics. And I'm like, well, it is, but it's also a reality now. Think about it like this, man. Africa can, and what I meant by just, DSI analyze for intel purposes, what I'm referring to is that what I've heard from folks who are from Africa, who are highly educated, highly, extremely knowledgeable, college, university degreed, and are stateside. I meet a lot of folks from Africa and all over the world, from every conceivable country on planet Earth. That's what I do. International affairs, geopolitics, intelligence collection, analysis, dissemination. So, yeah. I've heard from folks from the continent of Africa that what the Chinese government is doing in some instances is, it's like, yeah, we'll build some mega structure and we'll foot the bill for it. And we're not asking for anything in return, per se. But in the future, if there might be anything that we need from y'all folk, perhaps military strategic base of operations, I'm just saying. And if you don't comply, then we'll just turn off the power to your city. I'm being fucking honest, dude. And he and they have told me that they've already, demonstrated that, that hydroelectric dam that we built a couple of years ago? Yeah, it doesn't work today, does it? Yeah, you motherfuckers comply with our wishes and we turn the shit back on. Because currently, if you haven't checked, your power is off. Yeah, man. Yeah, real shit. So, don't quote me on any of this. None of this information should be construed as legitimate, legal, medical, business, advice, or any type of financial investment strategy data whatsoever. It's just one Sir Grove on the mic, podcasting. But yeah, so that's intel. For those of you who are not familiar with African affairs, what's going on the continent of Africa, how business is floating, you know what I'm saying? Economic development, financial, business, geopolitical, economic news related to the many countries of Africa. Now let's put it all into perspective. If you take the continent of Africa, take the United States and overlay it, do you know how many United States you can fit on the continent of Africa? Have you ever seen that demonstrated? How many United States can fit on the continent of Africa is my question for the crowd. Do the math, check it out, and ye shall find and know how strategic of an interest, the continent of Africa not only is now, but has always been mineral rich. I mean, we're talking about minerals and natural resources beyond imagination. And I'm not being disrespectful, but where do you think all those diamonds came from that made Russia as beyond imagination wealthy as it is now? I'm just saying they came from Africa. So, and uranium, nuclear weapons. So, look, Africa is where it is. And many countries from around the world are developing up, that is, scaling up and building up Africa. And you still have people in the West and other parts of the world who don't know that. The only frames of reference that they have are frames of reference from old textbooks that show like African like bushmen, like tribes, like with like spears and like, tribal like attire. They don't understand that is a thing of the past, mostly. And that Africa is fast becoming a technological marvel. It really is. Think about it. You have all the countries of the world, most of them, investing in some way, whether it's intellectually contributing, financially contributing, just observing as, well, I guess that would be intellectually contributing, but nonetheless, it's a world global collective effort at this point. I mean, even going back to the economic aid programs, what was it, the bands that came together when I was a kid, junior high school, it was called Band Aid, I believe was a Band Aid. Bands got together, like a Band-Aid, right, that you put on like a cut or an abrasion. Bands got together, trying to remember what it was called. I don't want to pull out the other devices and like look it up, but it was something like Band-Aid. And a bunch of bands performed, raised money for impoverished sections of Africa, and that's where the monies went, or was supposed to have gone. And so, a lot of charities, a lot of charitable organizations, a lot of causes, a lot of groups, societies, philanthropists over the years, decades, have contributed to the continent of Africa. Now, I know some would also argue that there has been colonialism. And, apartheid obviously is a stain on the history of European nations that participated in illegal apartheid. But nonetheless, we're in the future and wrongs are being rewritten. Not that they can ever be erased. But Africa, I would say, is moving, at least by my estimation, my projection, my observation, in a positive space-time trajectory at this point. And it's looking good. It's looking great. It's actually looking magnificent for Africa as a whole. And yes, there are still obviously problems regionally. In some places you have Christians being killed. I believe that would be Nigeria and some other places in Africa. You have regional issues. There was the conflict and friction between Eritrea, some would say Eritrea, some say Eritrea, and Ethiopia. And those tensions have been calmed, and there is now peace there. And then Sudan is now two Sudans. There's South Sudan and North Sudan. In the south, you have Juba, which is relatively new. Some people, they only know of one Sudan. They have no idea that the country split and it's now two countries. That's right. If you haven't checked lately, there's another Sudan. Hashtag Mandela effect. So you have that. And it's, Africa's so massive. There's just so much going on in Africa. And so that being said, I'm going to wrap this up. It's 20 minutes into my dissertation on the subject of regional and, regional geopolitics regional national politics of Africa, African countries, the continent of Africa, and the current, activity there. And let's see, what else is there? Oh, so 53 degrees out, 53 degrees outside. Looks like it's doesn't look like the winter here on the East Coast at all. Does not look or appear to be like any any winter that I recall on the East Coast in the past 15 years. This does not, this could be March, April, May, June, July right now, and it's not. It's we're halfway through January. So this is really weird, very strange, but whatever, things don't always stay the same. Things change over time, sometimes, and usually do. I'm not being facetious. I'm just saying that in some cases, some things are perpetual and they remain constant. But then you have things that do change or tend to change. And here on the East Coast, where I've been traveling throughout these different regions and states, hey, doesn't look like it used to. It looks different. And that's really interesting. So, anything else regarding Africa? Yeah, so space industries. Real quick. Space industries. There's a lot of land area. A lot of space. No pun intended. In which to put things. And I think and suspect that companies such as SpaceX and other companies will be looking to African countries as places in which to, or where to erect certain space industries, because creates jobs. It's kind of sort of virgin territory, and in a lot of cases is, and you, in doing that, you stimulate the economy, and I guess fourthly, you also avoid certain taxes that you would incur in the U.S. stateside, as well as so you defray, offset that and other costs, because you can do things cheaper in a lot of instances, or less expensively overseas. And then, of course, depending on the arrangements between those respective governments, I guess fifthly, you have certain perhaps incentives. It depending. So, yeah, 2020, 2020, Africa, Afrasia. I'm just saying, it used to be that Africa and Asia were geophysically connected. Geophysically connected. It is not a theory. It is a fact of science that Africa and Asia were once physically, geologically speaking, connected millions of years ago. And I see what's going on right now as being a recursive feedback loop in time. It's definitely history repeating itself in a future past context, very symbolic, very mathematically geometric, because we are talking about geometry, we are talking about geology, we are talking about ecology, we are talking about scientific knowledge of the future and the past, connecting the space-time continuum Space-time continuum, continuance, continuing, going from point A to point B, back to point A. Very symbolic. Afrasia. Afrasia. Once or growth. Thanks for tuning in to yet another episode of C4CW, casting 495 celebrities multiverse wide.